Hi, are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I was having a little bit of a sound issue earlier, so good.
You were on.
Six, 7, 7, 6.
Steve, are we
Are we
live?
live yet?
Mr. Chairman, we are live whenever you're ready to start.
Hi, Henry.
Good afternoon.
Where's everybody at?
I'm here. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, are you there?
Are we live yet?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, we are live.
Oh, Kathy, thanks for letting me know you can hear me. That's a great start. So I'll assume that that is the case, and we'll start off. I believe if we can unmute our reviser's side, we will have a brief statement on open meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me all right, sir? Okay. Very good. Due to the health and safety concerns,
I see Adam, but don't hear him. I don't know if that's the same for others.
Can you hear me now? anyone able to hear?
I can hear you.
Representative Corbett can hear you.
Okay. Continue on. It looks like the audio problem's on my end. I'll try and get caught up. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay. This is just a general statement that we read before these meetings, kind of just gives the background based on the guidance of the Attorney General. Due to the health and safety concerns, members of the public are not in attendance at this meeting, but full access to this meeting is being conducted by medium of interactive communication, allowing members of the public without cost to listen to the meeting through the use of live stream audio broadcasting on the internet. The link can be reached by www.kansaslegislator.org and by selecting the audio video link, then State House Live and Archive. The agenda for this meeting has been posted on the Kansas Legislature website, was included with the notice of the meeting, and any other documents presented during this meeting will be available on the website. Each speaker shall state their name and title each time the individual begins speaking. Again, my name is Adam Siebers with the Revisor's Office, or voting, so that the individual can be readily identified by remote listeners. All participants are required to ensure that microphones, phones, or other electronic devices are muted when the participants are not speaking, so that the ability of remote listeners or observers to hear the proceedings is not unnecessarily impeded. Public comment will not be allowed at this meeting. During this meeting, there will be no recess to a closed or executive meeting pursuant to KSA 75-4319 and amendments for 2. And finally, each motion, if any, will be clearly stated before any vote, and the chairperson will announce the results of the final vote. And with that, I'll be happy to turn it back over to the chairperson.
Thank you, and thank you for that overview. I don't believe there are any questions, so thank you for giving us the information. I would look for our partners with information systems and who is running the call. Is there anything that they would want to announce to us as we get started?
Absolutely. This is Robin Crumpton, and I'm just going to do a quick tutorial on the features that you could use down here at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You're going to see that you're muted. You're going to see a microphone, and it's going to have a slash through that. If you would like to speak, you can just hover over your picture and click the unmute button. By default, everybody is muted so that we don't hear any background sounds from whatever it is on your side that you may be doing. So if you would like to speak, go ahead and unmute your phone. Unmute the mic. You also will need to hold up your hand if you would like to ask a question. To do that, you are actually going to go over under the participants button at the bottom of your screen. Just kind of hover over it and you're going to see participants. And then you can go over to your name and it's going to say raise hand or lower hand. Do you see that option?
Yes.
Okay, so that's where you're going to do it. So if you would like to have something to say, you ask a question, go ahead and raise your hand. The host for this meeting is going to be Jessa Farmer. So she will be the one communicating with the chair directly to let the chair know that you have a question, and then they will answer in that order. Also, if you are going to speak, we ask that you have your video going. So right next to the microphone at the bottom, you'll see stop video. You can click on that if you need to get up and move away from your camera for anything while the meeting is going. And then once you're back, go ahead and just click on that start video again so that we can see your video going and see your face. The chat option, if you would like to chat directly with the host, you can do so, and the host will let the chairman know that you have a question, and or you can just ask a question directly to her and she will answer that as well. Any questions about functionality of using Zoom? Okay, Mr. Chair, I think you're good to go.
Thank you. I would have 2 questions just to pass along for Jessa and or Robin. One of our members is trying to log in, but gets the message that another meeting is in progress when she clicks on that. So if we could see if there are others we need to let in. So specifically, Representative Kincannon is trying to join us. And then also we have some of our participants who have dialed in. Their question is, if I am on mute and have dialed in, how do I remove mute for that?
Okay, on the phone, they can press 6 and 9, and that will mute and unmute them.
Okay.
On those on the phone, can you go ahead and try that now and make sure that works? Senator Tyson, are you able to get that feature to work?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me? This is Senator Tyson.
I can, Senator. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And thanks, Robin, for walking us through it. I don't know if there are other questions beyond that. I did see a couple of hands raised. I'm sorry I missed those earlier. If you still have questions, raise your hands again, and I will be glad to recognize you. I don't see any hands raised in the chat that I'm looking at the moment. So seeing none there, I think we will take one more step of making sure we have our T's crossed. And Ms. Gerard, we will do a quick roll call if we could, just to make sure we have a record of everyone who is on the call. And I would only suggest that go ahead and unmute yourself well before your name is called. I'm going to guess it'll be in alphabetic order, but I'm not positive. And I know sometimes it can take a while to get it unmuted, and then mute yourself afterwards, please. Leah?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Representative Mason,
Here.
Representative Gartner, Representative, pardon? Representative Gartner, Representative Alcala,
Present.
Representative Baker,
Present.
Representative Clayton,
Here.
Representative Concanon, Representative Corbett,
Here.
Representative Croft,
Here.
Representative Epley,
Here.
Representative Helgerson,
Here.
Representative Heineman,
Here.
Representative Kelly,
Here.
Representative Phillips,
Here.
Representative Perrell, okay, Representative Rogers,
Here.
Representative Stogstill,
Here.
Representative Timish,
Here.
Representative Topliker, Representative Warfield,
Here.
Representative Wassinger,
Here.
Representative Wolfmore,
Here.
okay, and Chris Courtwright,
Here.
Adam Siebers,
Here.
and Amelia Kovar Donahue, okay, I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Leah. And just to clarify, I'm not sure if you were able to hear all of them, but Gartner, Prell, and Topliker are here. I didn't hear clearly those names, but
Yeah, and I got them,
awesome. And then we'll continue to watch for Representative Concanon to join us.
yes, and I just
So.
put a check mark, okay, great.
Thanks, everyone. I think that takes us through most of the formalities. The goal for today is to just have a chance for us to talk about some of the issues that are on the table, and particularly anything that we want to move forward. If there are some items not on the list that you think need to be considered from work that we've done through the session, please let me know that, and we'll try and make sure we add all of those concepts into our discussion. For today, I wanted to have an update on the work that the Chamber and the Department of Revenue had done on 2657. I wanted to get back to a bill that we heard but did not work when the session ended for 294 on the property tax transparency bill. And then there were some other issues with tax that the Senate had worked on and what we had talked about with regard to payment plans that we thought were COVID related in 2607. It has passed out of committee, but I wanted to spend a minute talking about that bill and some other options and have asked Representative Kelly to help us with those. My goal would be that we spend roughly 1/3 of our time on each of those three topics, and we'll try and hold it to that. With that, I'll start with the marketplace topic, and we'll go through a bit of what has happened. We heard, I believe it was 2513, which was a bill that the Kansas Chamber brought forward on marketplace facilitators collecting tax. We later got a bill from the Department of Revenue, which is 2657. And in the time that we have been out of session, those entities met. And I was just going to have them give us an update with where they were in working through those bills. So I might start with Mr. Stafford and then go to Mr. Hale to talk through the Chamber working with House Bill 2657, the points that they felt were important, amendments that were there, and there are some documents that were sent to you on this if you wish to follow along, both a clean copy of that and one that has the amendments that are on it. But Mr. Stafford, if you'd walk through and let us know kind of the Chamber's position on where we are, and then a little bit from Revenue.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And committee, good to see you, even if it's over the computer. Hope everybody had a great Mother's Day weekend. I miss all of you, and I'm sure that not very many of you miss me, but it is good to see you, and I hope everybody's safe right now. The marketplace facilitator issue, as the chairman indicated, we introduced House Bill 2513, which was NCSL model bill, and had industry support. There were multiple versions. I think there were 3 or 4 marketplace facilitator bills, including Department of Revenue's 2657, that ultimately we ended up working with Department of Revenue to come up with language that we can support. Some of the changes that took place and some of the discussions that had as we go through the bill, for one point that we had was a $100,000 threshold to be included. That was a big piece from our membership. There was some other language dealing with auditing that was included in the bill at the request of some of our retail members. That's included in the current draft of an amended version of that bill. But ultimately, for full disclosure, as soon as you guys adjourned second week of March, we had a conference call the following week among our membership. And what was at hand was a provision in the department's bill, House Bill 2657, that dealt with the collection of other taxes and fees. And the biggest hang up from our membership was dealing with prepaid 911 fees. We had a split among our telecom members and our retail members on whether or not to include that provision in the bill. And Department of Revenue wanted that provision in the bill. We had that split among our membership and couldn't, I mean, I thought we'd get it. We were very close, I thought, to be able to get something that we're all in agreement on. And it just, we couldn't find, we tried, I think we had 3 or 4 conference calls, at least 2 of them alone with just our membership, and then several others with legislators, legislative leadership, and Department of Revenue representatives, and just couldn't get consensus on that. So that provision is not likely going to be in 2657, from my understanding, since there wasn't unanimous support there. But overall, everything that our members brought forward to the Department of Revenue with concerns over drafts in the language, ultimately, we got agreement among our folks, which is great. This is, I think, probably year 3 at least in working on marketplace facilitator legislation that hasn't passed for a variety of reasons. But ultimately, I think we've got something that we're mostly in agreement on. I know from the telecommunications industry, not having that other taxes and fees is kind of a hang up, but with our retail members asking to hold off until we can work on something this summer to try and find solution on that, which we're more than happy to do among our membership. it was our view, the chamber can't take a position if we have divided membership. And so, but we're more than willing to sit down with folks to get a solution to other taxes and fees outside of sales tax. But, we've been pushing for the sales tax, especially since the Wayfair decisions come out. Let's get that done and get that on the books and then build from there. I think the transient guest tax, I'm not 100% certain. I think that was in 2657. That was also included in 2513, our bill that we introduced. But really, a lot of lengthy conversations with Department of Revenue staff and our membership. I am greatly appreciative of everybody who put in time on this issue. But I think we've gotten as close to a uniform support of the bill as we can, knowing that there's still some looming issues that are hanging out there that will ultimately need to be addressed as this issue evolves over time. Obviously, internet sales tax is a big issue right now as we're all stuck at home and ordering online rather than going to stores. So it's prevalent, but we are more than happy to continue to work on finding solutions on other areas as we go forward. But I just thank you, Chairman Johnson, and everybody else who's spent time working to try to find a solution on this.
So same, I appreciate everybody that's working towards a solution. Thank you for that overview. I believe one of the copies that we had the balloon amendments included, as well as one that has those. If you need help finding a copy of that, I might look to our revisor to help us get a most recent copy if you don't have one. With that, I'd like to look to Mr. Hale. Mr. Stafford went over a number of things, and there were many amendments that were offered and agreed to on this bill, and he gave a summary of them. But Mr. Hale, if you'd point out some of those that might be more major, as well as the section 7 where disagreement remains.
Well, I think, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Michael Hale with the Department of Revenue. I'll echo Mr. Stafford's, it's good to see you, but it's nice to be in person. I think Mr. Stafford covered most everything pretty clearly, and don't really have any issues. The chamber had suggested striking several sections concerning referral and referrer. The department agreed to that. If you recall, the original 2657 did not have a de minimis 100,000. That is in the version that Adam sent out this afternoon. Full disclosure, Adam saved my bacon because I made an error yesterday and he was able to clean it up for me. I appreciate that very much, Adam. And I apologize if I caused you any heartburn there. The next provision that the chamber had asked for was, as Mr. Stafford said, section 4, adding the balloon, which is the department would only audit the facilitators and not the sellers, except in a couple of specific situations. And we agreed to that. The rest of it, I think, is pretty much agreed to by both the chamber and the department. It goes to section 7, which is the other fees and taxes. We had a lengthy teleconference with the members of the chamber and some of the larger platforms, including telecoms, major platforms that also have retail locations in Kansas, etc. And their concern wasn't so much that section 7 is in the bill, it was the timing. In the original version, section 7 would become operational on July 1st of 2020. And a few expressed concerns about the ability to configure their computers to handle that in such a short time frame. And so the department asked, is January 1st of 2021 achievable? And pretty much all the major players said yes, and they actually expressed appreciation for us extending that offer, except for one. One wasn't sure if they could actually get their computers coded properly. So then we offered July 1st of 2021. Would that be doable? And again, everybody on the call said yes, with the exception of the one who wanted time to check and see if they could possibly achieve that. And so that's kind of where we left it, was they were to let us know whether they could or could not. To date, we have not heard from them. It's 14 months. I would think that they should be able to get their computers coded. And so the draft you have in front of you has got the balloons where just for Section 7 only, that would become effective July 1st of 2021. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's kind of a summation of the meetings we've had.
Sounds good. Thank you for going through that. So the good news is there is agreement on a lot of this bill from those two parties. And to the members of the committee, our goal would be, if we are to move this forward, what wording would we want to see through whatever means we use, whether it is a conference committee, whether it is passing wording out potentially at our Thursday meeting on this topic that could be carried forward in whatever form, and in this and any other topics that are important to us. So I need your help thinking through how those work. I'm pretty comfortable looking at a starting point that the Chamber and the Department of Revenue came to with the agreement that is there. There is still some discussion on the Section 7 piece and where the committee would come out on that. There's not agreement from the Chamber side, and I think that their position would be to simply strike that in the most recent, although I don't know if the Department of Revenue changes their position from agreeing to July of 21, if that changes in the negotiation piece from their side necessarily on the options that are there. The bill as it is written, and Mr. Hale pointed out, shows that those fees would be collected in July of 2020, and striking that, let me check my version to see if that is in here. Yes, the version that I have from Adam does show the 2020 stricken and the 2021 date in there, but Section 7 still in the draft as we have it. So that's where we would start. Are there questions on that or any of the other sections that are there? Very importantly, I'd look for any raised hands if you have a question or a comment. And short of that, we'll take just a vocal injection. Representative Croft.
Representative Croft, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. What is the fiscal note on this? Or is there one?
There is a fiscal note on this one. And if Kathleen wants to go through it formally, otherwise, if she's not, I'm looking at the small screen to see if she's ready there. Otherwise, I can at least give you that. Kathleen, great. Off to you.
Okay, by adding in the de minimis threshold on House Bill 2657, the fiscal note is 19.4 million. That's a positive. SGF would be 16.2, and the State Highway Fund would be 3.2. That's for fiscal year 21. For fiscal year 22, it would be 22.8 million. 19 of that to the State General Fund, and then for fiscal 2023. The impact would be 23.5 million, 19.7 of that to the State General Fund.
Any further questions, Representative Croft? So seeing none there, anyone else with a thought or comment of how you would like to move forward on this matter? Is that a hand from Representative Helgerson?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Is your goal then to get an agreement on the structure of the bill and then look for vehicle already in conference? Is that correct?
So I don't fully know. That's a great question. But one route would be this is an item that is in conference and there is a vehicle in conference. So it's potential it could move forward that way. It is possible that we would look to pass out 2513 on which we have had a hearing with language that we agree to, just so that it could be ready to drop into whatever process presents itself as we go forward. And that would be the process for any of the things that we would deal with. So I'm not certain.
So do you want a general motion or a conceptual motion? Not necessarily placing it, but just saying that the committee agrees with the compromise between the two parties?
Yes, so that's what we would look towards, and we would probably do that on Thursday, just bringing folks back up to speed and giving a chance to kind of think through it, but looking at any action that we would want to take potentially at our next meeting. So thank you, Representative Peterson. Representative Corbett, I see your hand, and then Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman. Kind of to follow up on the last question, is basically you thinking the committee should be thinking about the bills you have here on the agenda as going into something like a conference tax bill that come out as one unit. Is that kind of what you're thinking on this?
Good question. So yes, Representative Corbett, I think that is possible, although there are two tracks possible. The conference report with all of the tax items is one, with a portion of the tax items. Whether or not either the Senate or the House goes on GO, I don't know is certain. I am hearing more rumblings that the Senate will be on GO than the House. So perhaps those bills will be in another format that we would have an opportunity to concur on. Perhaps we choose a Senate bill to put this in if we choose to pass it out, so that there is a chance to work with our Senate partners on this issue in the same way, carrying it forward. Is that as clear as mud, which is where we're starting, Representative Corbett? So just to restate that, the goal, I think, for our tax committee is to look at some of the language that we would be most comfortable with and having that assembled. And then I think the exact format will continue to be more clear as we go forward. So thank you both for those questions. Representative Corbett, did you have a follow-up?
No, not right now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to Representative Kelly.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Question is for Eric. The compromise that the second one that Mr. Hale talked about, is that one that was also not accepted by your group, or was that brought up during the conference call?
The second,
July of 2021.
To be honest, reading through the draft I have in front of me, I'm under the impression among our membership we would work this out this summer. It was asked to delay until July 2021, and our membership at the time on that call got feedback and stated to us that they were unable to get that done in time. They didn't want to have something in place yet, and just asked, let's work on it this summer. And so even delaying it, I am getting texts coming through here right now from some members expressing concern. So we can talk offline and I'll get a clear answer if this is going to be discussed again on Thursday and let you know. Okay,
that'd be great, because it seems like it would be a fairly generous length of time to get the software.
Yeah, and that was discussed on the call with revenue and our members, that we're giving you plenty of time, to a little over a year to take care of it. The response was yes, but what are other taxes and fees? And two, think about how many taxing subdivisions the companies operating in all 50 states and however many countries are working on. That they're just addressing sales tax. And now what is, one member asked on the call, well, what does other taxes and fees include? Is that tire recycling fees? Is that electronic recycling fees? we're not certain what that includes. Let's work all that out and see if we can put something specific in statute and get direction from Department of Revenue as we go forward and work on that this summer for something next year. So yeah, I'm a little surprised reading that in here, to be honest.
Any further questions, committee? Representative Wassinger.
That other taxes and fees are not included, but it appears that there's language for that in the new section 7. Can you clarify that?
And we may have missed the first part of your comment, Representative. Was that directed to the Department of Revenue?
And whoever can answer that question.
And did anyone catch the beginning to catch the whole question?
I'll restate.
Thank you.
The chamber indicates other taxes and fees are not included, but it appears that there's language for it in the new section 7. Can you clarify that?
So I can start, and perhaps Revenue and then the chamber can add in. So this 2657 did originate from the Department of Revenue. 2513, I believe it was, originated from the chamber, and the chamber worked hard with Revenue to put their concepts into 2657. One element that was in there is that section 7. And on the call, I think Mr. Hale had stated that that was an area that they had asked to hear back from someone. And I think it may have been a particular member or so on the call that had suggested they may get back to Revenue on that. That so far had not occurred. So it is still in the draft that we have, but it'd be up to us to figure out how we would choose to go forward with that or any of the other language that we have. If we go to where there is agreement, I believe we have agreement on all but section 7 in terms of ways to potentially move forward. So, Mr. Hale, anything to add?
Are we unmuted? Yeah, okay. We got somebody else running a mouse over here, and I wasn't sure if it was on or not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's Michael Hale with the department. You're correct. House Bill 2657 stemmed from the Governor's Tax Council, and I can't recall it. It may have been Representative Warfield actually introduced it, and then we had the hearing on it. It was actually from the Governor's Tax Council. And the current section 7 that you have in front of you today has always been in there. The one exception is the date change to 2021. We had indicated on the April 15 phone call, and again, there was only one entity that expressed a concern. That the rest of the entities on the call that day thought that July 1st of 2021 was doable. And again, no one expressed concern about the actual taxes and fees. It was a matter of timing. That's the only issue. We did indicate to the members of the chamber that were on the call and others from the community and other retailers and so on. We have a list of the taxes and fees that we would provide to the retailers or the platforms. But to my way of thinking, there's only about 3 or 4. Tire tax is one, the 911 fees is another. It's possible that there's a platform that sells high-end tobacco products, conceivably high-end wines or alcohol, and then batteries. And that's really it. You're not going to do dry cleaning services over the internet, so you don't have to have that fee. The clean drinking water fee, you're not purchasing your water utilities through that, etc. Those are the 4 or 5 that I can think of that the department and the state administer that would be applicable to most of the platforms. We have those. We can interact with the platforms electronically to have that all arranged. They don't have to deal with locals. There's no such thing as a local 911 that's state administered. So it's very doable. The one entity that seems to have a problem with the timing, there in Europe, they deal with all those VAT taxes. They're international. I don't understand the difficulty in these 4 or 5 taxes. Like I said, they were the only ones on the April 15 phone call that expressed a concern.
Thank you. Mr. Stafford, your perspective.
It's, I guess I'm just confused. I thought this, I mean, that's, very beginning of my presentation was set under the pretense that Section 7 was not going to be in the bill because there was not agreement yet on how to address that. And the fact that it's in there, again, when we're talking, the big hangup was the prepaid 911 fee for the telecom industry. But this is broader, dealing with new taxes and fees that we are not in a position to support new taxes and fees outside of from this language, based on all the phone calls that we had in March and April among our membership. And so whether it's one entity or 17, we carry the message of what our members ask us to do, but I can tell you that there was more than one entity that did have problems with other taxes and fees language included in the bill. And that's why we were having so many calls among our membership to try to get something worked out on at least just the 911 portion, which we were not able to do. And then you throw in the other taxes and fees. On top of that, I think it was mentioned on our call that only one other state has an other taxes and fees, or maybe 2 other states at most have an other taxes and fees provision in their state law. And I think it's just Washington State, if I recall from our conversation. So this is not something that is uniform right now across the country. Again, we need to talk about it and look at it and discuss this with our members over the summer. But if it's so easy for IT companies, for businesses to adapt their IT platforms to adopt internet sales tax and other taxes and fees, I don't think we would have issues with our unemployment insurance benefits taking so long to get paid out. Clearly, IT is complex, software is complex, and if you're asking a company to have a platform that collects multiple taxes and fees through online purchases, when we're just trying to focus on sales tax initially, and again, this started late in the discussions too. I mean, we weren't hearing about 911 fees or other taxes and fees until late February, March, when 2657 appeared to be the vehicle that was moving forward, because that provision is not in 2513. So when you're dealing with thousands and thousands of taxing jurisdictions, I think it's a little unfair to assume that the private sector can just readily adapt at the snap of a finger for Kansas what Department of Revenue or any other state agency wants. So I think we have significant heartburn over this provision, and yeah. I hope that's clear.
So thank you. And thank you, Representative Wassinger, for the question. I do see does KDOR have another comment? I don't want to go back and forth too many times here. Or a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Michael Hale. I guess the issue as we see it is very similar. If we take a step back as to why remote sellers in the first place and marketplace facilitators in the first place are now being required after the Supreme Court decision in Wayfair to collect taxes for sales tax purposes. That same thought process of Main Street brick and mortar stores, they have to collect and remit the tire tax. They have to collect and remit the 911 fees. Why shouldn't a multinational platform do the same? So it's also comes down to a question of fairness and uniformity within the state on these taxes. And so that's why Section 7 was in there, in large part because you do have brick and mortar hometown stores that are having to collect these fees, whereas the large multinational conglomerates that are operating platforms are not. And that is a significant profit margin for them, that they have a competitive advantage over the brick and mortar stores. And that's why Wayfair was decided the way it was. And this just follows through with that. And it's true, currently Washington State is the only other state that has this in their statute. But other states are now looking at their codes to include this in there.
Okay. Mr. Stafford, I'd give you one other chance just to keep the ball bouncing back and forth if you had a comment, and then I'll recognize Representative Gardner.
I don't think I have anything else to add, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. I appreciate it, though.
Just fine. Thank you. And if I can just summarize that, and I'll get right to your question, Jim, which may follow up on this, but to Representative Wassinger's question, that is right on point. And this bill did come from revenue. Section 7 is a part of their bill, and they had not received further guidance after the call in taking that out in an agreement. It was not in the bill that we heard from the chamber. So whether or not we put it in is something then that is up to us as we work through the policy piece, and whether we wish to join those states that have taken this step or if we wish to take a first step and consider this later. And how much ground we want to break considering where we are today and the fact that we have one day to consider doing something if we wish to do it. So Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay. Number one, I think Michael Hell needs to move closer to the computer. I could hardly hear him. I don't know if anybody else had that problem. Might be just me. I guess I have not read Section 7. But my question is concerning other taxes and fees. When you talk about 911 fees, I don't understand, are we trying to apply sales tax and have them remit sales tax on that 911 fee? Is that the question?
So I might look to one of our partners to clarify that, but I think the question is, at what point are 911 fees collected? We know where they are if you literally physically go by the phone, but if you don't, is that something that must be collected by, I don't know, a company like AT&T or by the marketplace facilitator if whatever might have been used to make that sale. And then would it be through that marketplace facilitator? If somebody from our staff wants to give the right answer, please do. Might look to the Department of Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael Hale again. You're right. The 911 fees are associated with the prepaid phone cards and prepaid phones. There's two options under state law to pay the 911 fees. One is through your phone service, and that is a certain certain dollar amount. I think it's 90 cents for the 911 fees. The other is the prepaid phone fees, which I think is 2.06% of the sale. And so, Representative Gardner, that is what we would be looking for if you were to go out to a marketplace platform and purchase a prepaid phone card or the phone device itself. That platform would collect and remit the 911 fees for that. And interestingly enough, some of the retailers that you're familiar with going and shopping that sell 911 prepaid phone cards, when you go into their store here in Kansas, you pay that. But if you go to their .com platform, you might not. It's the same entity, but since they have a retail shop, if you go in there, you pay the 911 fees. But if you go on their .com, you don't. And that's another example of how that would be a competitive advantage.
Does that answer your question, Representative Gardner?
Okay. I think it does, Mr. Chairman. I'm just, I think it's, when you get into other fees, I think it's pretty complicated. And I've the department and everyone some time to work on. I know the July 1st day, 2021 should do that, but I just think we need to have these folks get back together and hash it out over the next few months.
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate the perspective. I'll take one more question on this, and then we'll move into the next topic, and that question would be from Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you hear me?
Yes.
So what I kind of agree with the last caller a little bit. I mean, Kansas business people have kind of been fighting pretty hard with this COVID deal, and some of them have paid property tax and taxes and not even had their doors open. And I think if we could wait a few months and let the chamber and everybody get on the same page before we pass something nobody truly understands, I would rather wait and get it right than do harm to anybody. That's just my thought.
Thanks for weighing in. I appreciate those perspectives. Continue to think about that as we approach Thursday and what our questions would be. One question I'd have for the Department of Revenue offline is if we have a guesstimate of what our fiscal note is on this type of an issue. Not critical, but one other thought. And then we'll talk through other issues. As you have questions in the next couple of days, we'll continue to ask those and see if we can seek answers. Thank you, committee, for your engagement on that. One of the items we've worked on for several years to consider moving forward. Next, I want to turn to some of the property tax work that has been done by the Senate in Senate Bill 294. We did have a hearing on this, and trying to think how to best proceed just to get us back up to speed on the issue and looking at the transparency and the work that was there. I didn't provide a lot of opportunity. I wonder if I go to a couple of our folks who are on the call to provide an overview of how it works and an overview of concerns. I do see Mr. Estes on the call, as well as Senator Tyson. Mr. Estes, if you're ready to give us a couple of thoughts about 294, and then Senator Tyson, some of the detail of how it works. And then I might look to staff if there are a couple of other things that you think we need to know on the bill. But Mr. Estes, if you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And can you hear me okay, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. I might be sitting too far back from my computer too. So no, I really don't envy, and I want to thank the House Tax Committee for letting me weigh in here, and for everybody on the call. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a discussion. I would like to inform everybody on the call that this has been a long, drawn-out process for myself and a lot of individuals in Kansas. Some of you, I think, have probably received some letters from some of the people that help participate in a lot of those meetings and show a concern for why we need Senate Bill 294. But I do want to, I don't envy your position. Tax has got to be one of the toughest areas of anything that you guys do and gals do. And I just want to thank you for what you do. I'll start with that. The one thing that I'm going to share a little bit, rather than just read my testimony, you guys may have copies of that. Is that right, Mr. Chairman?
We do. Thank you.
Okay. And so I don't really want to go into reading that or going through that. I can, and I'd be glad to answer any questions on it. But I would like to explain a little bit about what got me involved in this. And it's not just about BTI. I have Buckland Tractor and Implement Company, headquartered out of Buckland, Kansas. It's been there since 1944. We're a fourth generation business now, 200 employees, 6 locations from Harper County, Oklahoma, all the way to Nebraska border. In those 6 counties stretch a long ways, 3 hours from one end of the territory to the other. But I will tell you, I grew up in 1986. I was helping my father protest tax. I swore I would not protest, and I said the word never. I don't use that word a lot, but I eat crow every time I seem to use it. And I just told myself, I saw what he went through in '86 when he had me go to every courthouse in the state of Kansas and get every property tax on everybody's machinery from every implement dealer, not John Deere, or every implement dealer in the country. And we had a briefcase over 2 inches thick of what people paid and how inequitable it was. I didn't do a lot other than I didn't figure out how taxes were calculated. I did know how to do a protest. However, again, I always wanted to get along with my appraisers in my counties, and I invite them into my buildings. Got a good reputation with them and rapport with them. And I don't envy their positions either. They have a lot of stuff that they do and a lot of tools that they use to interpret how they're going to appraise and evaluate properties. Commercial, residential, it just goes on and on and on. Use tax, everything. But anyway, by doing this and actually protesting my tax, which I swore I'd never do, and the reason I did, and if you've got a pen in front of you, write it down because it's accurate. But my taxes, property tax for BTI was $1,460 a day to be in my buildings and it's just unattainable. There's no farmer alive going to pay that to us. And that's just property tax. Property tax wasn't designed to get in our business like it has. And there's no reason that we can't share in the wealth. And there's some really good people that I've learned through these committees. I've met with House representatives, senators. I met with a lot of different PBD. I met with bankers. I met with a lot of different business people, individuals. I can go on and on and on and on about how many people we met with. But
Mr. Estes, I may ask a question just to hit a little on. I know you looked at a lot of things. If you could tell us a little of what you looked at and what 294 does to help.
Yeah. Okay. That's where I was headed. Thank you, Chairman. And I will get too long-winded, so stop me if I do. But one of the things that 294 presented, and that's really kind of where I was headed. Ron Hyman gave us, and he's presented to you guys the actual taxes in the state of Kansas, and he has it well recapped. I sent you a copy of it, Chairman, a while back, but when you have 2,889,000 people live in Kansas, and you have, because of exemptions and all the things that have happened over the years since 1986, since reappraisal, 1.372 are paying tax. So anytime you have taxes escalating and assessed values going up and fewer people in your state to pay the tax, whether it's a rural area or populated area, that's another thing that I found didn't matter. It happened no matter where you live. Johnson County had just as many tax problems as they did out here, in some cases more. And but by doing that and replicating a state that actually has a lot of similarities. The big ones are population, of course, and then there are some things that the Kansas Chamber that Eric put out that explains that we have a lot more entities that we support, which compounds that and makes it more difficult. But the one thing that I liked about the truth and tax ending of 294 is that once they hit the mill levy, if they actually do the assessed value and it comes in high, right now, they do not turn that back. They do not lower the mill levy. And you've got PVD on here, and I met with David and I met with Roger Ham, and it was a great conversation. We met with appraisers. We got input from appraisers all across the state, not just our rural appraisers out here. We got input from everybody that was involved in this to try to find out, because there was too many people pointing fingers at one another rather than trying to really drill down on something that would fix it. And by doing these committees and all these meetings that we have been on, I can tell you that we came with all kinds of proposals. And one of the things in my business I cannot stand is a habitual bitcher. BTI is fine. I protested my taxes and I got them down to $960 a day. It's still too high, but by doing the protest, and if the assessed values were that accurate, I asked appraisers, if you all do it the same way, why were my taxes a third higher than what I got them lowered to? And I had to protest it to do it. And there's so many businesses, please understand, with COVID, it's even worse, but there's so many businesses. We're just out here trying to make a living, and we don't have time to jump through all the hoops to do the protests and go out and hire people to do it. I took the time to do it because I knew how to do it, and I had a lot of good appraisers. I had PVD even help me. I had a lot of good people help me through this process so I can understand it. I don't want finger pointing here because that isn't what this is about. What this is about is giving the tax committees, giving the state of Kansas a tool. It's not an exact science. It's not going to fix it just because we set this in motion, but it's a head down the right path. The other thing I want you to think about when you're talking about Utah versus Kansas, Utah locked their Senate Bill 294, or their truth and taxation lending, at a low. We are locking in at the highest assessed values that we've ever seen in the state of Kansas. You're not locking on a low. Senate Bill 294 isn't going to do that. So please, if you would, consider that. The property tax imposed by local governments since 1997 has jumped 180% in Kansas. I don't know, the other thing is the taxpayers, we've surveyed, and taxpayers, 75% of the taxpayers want the entities to have a vote if they're going to raise tax. Doesn't mean they don't want to raise tax. They just want transparency if you're going to raise the tax. And then the other thing is the taxpayers pay the fees. And the county officials, I love them and they're great and they do their jobs well, but they don't pay tax in those counties and those municipalities. So as a politician, please consider who's paying those fees and why those fees are important to all of us and that we do have to have a tax. Please understand that this is a tool that a lot of people worked on to get this to try to pass through the House and Senate. The last thing, Chairman, I'd like to present, I came down on the 17th to present, and I had two other presenters with me. I didn't get the opportunity to present, and I understood why, the running late, COVID, there's just a lot of things that didn't allow that to happen. And I wish we could have presented then. But the one thing I guess I was so shocked about is that it didn't come out of committee, the committee, and it passed 39-0 in the Senate. So the last thing I expected to do was have to really come down and testify on a bill that passed that unanimously. So please, House Committee, please consider as a business person why we're trying to give you the tools. This was a boots on the ground deal with hundreds. This wasn't just 10 meetings. This was hundreds of people getting together and having discussions about what we could do to fix the solution and not just bitch about the solution. And with that, Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to present.
Thanks for being available today if we have questions on it. And I'm going to give Trey Cocking a couple of moments to share some thoughts responding to that. And also we'll see if Senator Tyson can give us an overview of what needs to be enacted or the work that they had done. But if you have questions, begin raising your hands and I'll recognize you as we can go forward. Mr. Cocking, I think you're on somewhere. And if you have, again, just a couple of thoughts that are concerns that you think make it difficult for municipalities or counties or the key points you would have us remember.
Absolutely, Chairman Johnson. Thank you for having me. Trey Cocking, Deputy Director of League of Kansas Municipalities. From the get-go, I want to say that we are not opposed to this idea. Transparency for restoring decision-making to local elected officials. On its face, we think that is a great concept. Our hang-up on 294 is on a couple of things. One, we really wish this was Utah. If this was a Utah model, it would be much easier to swallow. In Utah, every taxing jurisdiction is subject to the same rules, not just a limited number of taxing jurisdictions. So 294 excludes schools, it excludes the state. Our concern with that is if the city of Atchison, where I worked for 8 years, sends out a statement, I get my statement and it says my property taxes are going up $15. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. I'm not going to mess with it. Well, then I get my statement in November and I quickly find out that it's not just the $15 that the city taxes went up. It is the state assessed mill levy. It's the school levy and everything combines together. And now all of a sudden my taxes are going up $150. And where I'd only thought they were going up $15 with the truth in taxation statement received back in August or September. So I'm concerned with that. I'm concerned that how this creates what this does with new construction. In Utah, new construction is exempted. I think we've talked enough that we're okay saying, hey, there is a tax increase here because of the new construction. But the way the revenue neutral rate lays that out, that basically penalizes cities for having new construction that you have to serve with services because it says that your taxes should be lowered because of the new construction. We're fine saying that there is additional taxes from new construction, but saying that somebody's taxes through the revenue neutral rate should be lowered because of new construction, that seems grossly unfair to us. And then the last big point I will hit on is it calls for the decision to be made at the same time as the truth of taxation hearing. This is problematic for us because if a citizen does come up with a good idea, somebody has valid points, there is no time to study those ideas. If you guys had to make a decision at the same time you guys had every hearing, it would be difficult. It is important to have time that decision makers reflect on those ideas and be able to get back to folks. And those are our main concerns with 294. There are some timing issues. And then the last issue is on the refund issue. We think it's difficult that the bill calls for, if there's an error in calculation, that we're potentially mailing checks back for 11 cents to folks all in every city if there's a miscalculation. We think that's unfair and some sort of safe harbor needs to be done with that or some sort of credit system needs to be developed. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. And committee, remember questions that you have for our speakers that are here. Senator Tyson, if you can work through the magic of the 6 and 9 on the phone, if you have some thoughts, and in particular, if the Senate looked at some of those things, if you looked at, the point that was brought up on the date of the vote versus the hearing or the refund issue and other thoughts you can share with us.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to visit about this issue. It is critical. Kelly did a great job. This is so important, especially during this COVID-19. We have individuals who are not just worried about how they're going to pay their property tax, how they're going to pay for other bills, and this burden just keeps growing exorbitantly throughout the state. And what this bill does is brings transparency. And, some people are offended by the truth in taxation language. It's language that was used in Tennessee and Utah. Both of those states have had similar legislation implemented for over 35 years, and it's worked. The opposing comments that were brought up are interesting. The K through 12 schools in Kansas, we're in a different situation. We've just finished a lawsuit that we know that the letter that goes out, it is optional for the county to include that information. So the K through 12 information can be included on the letter. There's nothing to exclude that. And in fact, we encourage it. That would just enforce the truth in taxation and more clarity so that you would have every single taxing authority on the same letter. The Senate also looked at new construction. That amendment was offered on the Senate floor. It failed. I don't remember the vote, but supermajority killed it. The Democrats and Republican. It was a bipartisan vote that did not want that effort. There was also an effort to bring in a CPI index, such as what we have with the property tax lid at this time. All that does is ensures an automatic increase with the CPI index. That one failed on a voice vote. It didn't even get a count. The problem with that, it's not that new construction would automatically lower or anybody's property taxes. What it does do is brings transparency. When new construction comes in, then the local government just explains to the voters as to why they need that new revenue. It's again, transparency with the process. That's what we're about with our government and our representation. The discussion about the idea that it can't be, the decision at the same time of the vote, that's an interesting comment, because what happens is the letters go out and people are going to be commenting throughout the process. They're not going to wait until the day of the meeting to contact their representatives. You know that, I know that. That's how it works for our system, and this is how it would work for the locals. The day of the meeting, the locals would define what that comment period looked like, and then they would have a vote at the time of the meeting. It's just for clarity and for we had a situation in one county in my Senate district. There were 100 people showing up every week at the county commissioners meeting. And every week, in fact, one day the county commissioners went into executive order. Then they went in for 20 minutes. They came out. The 100 people were still there. Went in for another 20 minutes. People were still there. Did it again. The people had ordered pizza for lunch. And so the commissioners just canceled the meeting and then went to another week. The 100 people showed up again. Well, that's unrealistic. And I'm not saying that every county would do that. But if we would have the meeting, have it on a set time and the vote on a set time, then we absolutely know what's going to happen. And it's that transparency. This bill, as Kelly said, we worked hard. There were stakeholders from all over the state on it, and all types of individuals that deal with property taxes on all sides. It's the best solution for what we are facing today. And I've asked other people, bring your input. This is not the original bill. We listened to testimony. We removed the property tax lid. We have 2 more amendments that we're going to work on tomorrow in the Senate to codify the dates that anybody has concerns, and to make sure that the language is correct. We're going to have it that the county clerk does send the letter so that there's no confusion on that. We have a template that's been created by the Department of Accounting and Reports, or Reports and Accounting under Department of Administration. We've worked through all the logistics. It's implemented next year, so it gives a year to work out the kinks, because with any legislation, the devil's in the details. And we have been very thorough on this, very thorough. It's just there's individuals that they say they want transparency, but they truly don't, because they know that this bill will demonstrate as to where the property taxes increases are coming from.
Thank you, Senator. And I'll give Trey just a moment if there are any key thoughts that come up from that, but just a moment or two if there's anything that has to be explained further, and only trying to give equal time back and forth.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. As I've said, we are not opposed to the concept on new construction. We just want new construction to be shown. Here's what new construction is, how much is the tax from new construction. We think that's an easy ask. We're not trying to hide anything there. We want to be super transparent on it. And that's where we are, and I understand what the senator is saying about meeting at the meeting, and we have no problem noticing that meeting. I've sat through enough budget hearings in my 11 years in local government that there are times that you're absolutely know what's going to happen, and there's other times that you're surprised, and the governing body needs time to process and digest those conversations and how to move forward. And so we think there needs to be some way to be reflective there. And my overwhelming sense is that it works better for the taxpayer when the governing body is able to be reflective, because typically they're in a position to do an up or down vote. They've gone this far, so they're probably going to go ahead and take the yes vote on that. However, if they have time, they have time to work with staff to come up with alternatives and maybe pare that request down some.
Thank you. We have a couple questions from the committee that we will move to and see if we can circle back for other comments. First, Representative Corbett, and then Wolf Moore.
Thank you, Chairman. I know a lot of you all have had probably over the last few weeks or months, I've had tons of calls from county constituents where their property taxes have just gone crazy and they have nowhere to go and they're just frustrated. I think this gives it shows the taxpayers who's credible for what. They sign their name off of it. They need a break, and they need somewhere to see how things work. And I know it's a long way to go, but I'd like to see this maybe started to 2021, and so we can at least say to the taxpayers who are just being whipped to death that we're at least trying to give you a voice. And I'm sure I'm not the only one getting the phone calls, so that's just my 2 cents worth, but it's a good start. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Wolf Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question I wasn't quite clear on. So as the bill stands now, what is the implementation date?
The implementation date, and we are not planning on changing that, is 2021.
My concern with it, that's probably my biggest concern with this. I talk to my local government 3 times a week, or at least, because of everything going on in Wyandotte County with the COVID crisis. And it's kind of all hands on deck, probably in most local governments, trying to deal with this issue. And it seems like a sort of a rough time for them to have to implement a new system this January.
It wouldn't be January, if I may, Representative Wolf.
Okay.
It would, the law would take place January 1st, but the implementation would not start until their budget process, which would not start until later in the year, in the second quarter.
Right, but they have to do a lot of preparations to implement the new system.
Actually, no. The preparation that will be implemented is the department, or I keep calling it department, the Division of Reports and Accounting. They're creating the templates for the letter, and it could be depending on how their systems are set up, it could be as simple as an export and a mail merge. But, you know, they could want to update their systems also. This is not, you know, of course, I'm coming from a unique situation. I have an IT background and I understand what we're asking in these changes. But this is critical. This is, if you are a legislator that has not heard from your constituents on property taxes, I will be shocked. That is one of the main issues that we hear about when we go out. And so if we keep kicking the can down the road, we're not going to address this problem ever. And I'm not going to go home to my constituents and tell them that I did not do everything I possibly could to find a solution. And it's not local control, because it gets rid of the lid. It completely removes the lid and allows the locals to be in control of their governing body.
And so at least in talking to my local government officials, it's a little more complex than to implement it, because I'll have to change certain procedures and I'll have to have new policies. So I would be more supportive, given what's, as I said, given what's going on with COVID and the immense amount of work and redeployment of individuals to help with that, that I'd be much more supportive. I understand your stance, but I would be more supportive if this was possibly put off for a longer period of time to allow us to get through this crisis. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. I also have a question from Representative Kelly.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Couple questions. One that I wanted to ask, and maybe this would be for Trey. He mentioned one of the things would be the timing. Is the timing, I think I've heard from my county clerk about timing issues in years when there's an election and with all the budgets that come into their office, and they have to help sometimes. Is that the timing you're talking about, or just the period to get the city's budget ready and in?
So we do have two concerns with timing. Is right now the way that the bill is written, the city would essentially have to have their budget done July 15th. So almost 6 months before the start of the fiscal year, and get that to the county if you're having a hearing. And then our other concern is that there's another section of the law that would still require a city to have a budget hearing and adopt that budget by August 25th, and then turn around, and then this notice would go out, and then you would have to have your truth and taxation hearing in September. So we have a lot of concern that needs to be synced up. We've been working on we have a draft amendment that would do that, would sync that up so that you could have your budget hearing and your truth and taxation hearing at the same time.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, if I may, that's not accurate. There is nothing in the bill that stops them from not having that on the same day right now. There's a time span for the truth and taxation hearing, and the only item on that truth and taxation hearing is that it has to be completed by September 20th. And if they do a truth and taxation hearing, their budget has to be completed by September 20th. If they do not go through the truth and taxation hearing, it's somewhat like the property tax lid, then their budgets are due on the dates that they currently are set now. So there is nothing in the bill that stops them from the flexibility of having a truth and taxation hearing from the day that they get their valuations from their appraisers, or if they want to even have it sooner than that, they're allowed to. It's just that they have to have it by September 20th. And they can have that budget hearing whenever that time frame is, and they can have them both on the same day.
So our concern is our general counsel tells us that 79-1801 needs to be amended, and 79-2933 would need to be amended to sync that up. And our
we
other
have that
concern is
amendment ready for tomorrow. So
Okay.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. And then, just waiting on the county clerk because it's not in our control when those notices go out.
Representative Kelly, did you have anything further on your questions?
I do. I've got two other quick questions. One, and I don't know whether there's someone from PVD on the call or not, or someone else that could answer it, Trey, but is there the possibility of, when we're looking at the times that we're in right now and what appraisals could be and all, could we end up with a tax shift if between different, a tax shift to ag away from commercial or residential? Is that an issue to have a concern about?
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to speak to that, or?
Sure.
Yeah, actually, it's not a concern because this doesn't look at whether it's commercial, personal, or ag. It looks at the total valuation. So if the total valuation increases and they would want to capture that money, then they would have to have a truth in taxation hearing. Now, if the valuations go down, then, and they want to capture the same amount of money as the previous year, they would not have to send out any letters. They would just change the revenue neutral number and the mill rate and go on. So it's not based off of industry. It's just based off of total revenue from the previous year.
I was just wondering if the shift could occur from the fact that ag on its rolling average might stay high and residential and commercial might go down. If they wanted the same amount, could ag get a greater portion charged to them?
No more so than they do now. I mean, that happens now. So what it would, it's kind of, as the gentleman from Utah described it, the former president of the Senate, it's like a tub of water, and you have the same amount of water. If you want to add to the water, then you have to send out your letters and your notices. But otherwise, you have the same amount of water, and as the valuations fluctuate within the county, then yes, your taxes will individually could go up and down. But overall, it's the same amount of water.
A third question real quick, and Representative Wolfmore talked about it. I mean, I have wondered at the same time if there is an advantage, considering the COVID situation, to change the implementation to 2022 and maybe use 2021 as a dry run year to see how it works, have the different governing bodies do a dry run on this, see where they are and see where the potential problems are, and then correct them in the session of 2022.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, if that's something the House wants to entertain, that's their objective. I'm just conveying to you what the Senate passed.
Thank you.
And that's it for me.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, is that Mr. Cocking?
Yeah, if I could just add, I do want to let the committee know we're seeing scary numbers as far as this budget year on sales tax numbers, potentially on property tax numbers, on franchise fees across the board. I've had some confidential conversations with cities that I won't name, but there's layoffs coming, and potentially ugly layoffs if there's not congressional funding hopefully coming our way. But we're concerned with what we're seeing. So we're really tepid on this budget year. A dry run as we make this change, I do think makes a lot of sense to cities across the state.
I have one more question from Mr. Corbett and a comment from Mr. Estes. So Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've sat here listening to all this, and it seems like the thing we're trying to help here are the taxpayers. And we're seems like on this bill, the Trey and everybody, you're worried about the counties and you're worried about this and that. Just think of the people who are trying to keep their jobs, the stress they must be under. And some of these people are close to, in some of these places, maybe even losing their place because of the taxes. This doesn't change much, but at least it gives them a voice. And not to implement it as soon as you can, you're kind of telling the taxpayers who are who are paying for this state, just blow it off. We'll kick the can another 2 years. We're worried about the municipalities. We're worried about this, but we're not really worried about you. I get frustrated. The taxpayer seems in this committee to always get the short end of the stick. I mean, this gives us a chance finally, maybe to give business and farmers and just the average Joe in this state a voice. So yeah, that's just me listening here. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. And I have been remiss on one. My apologies. I'll get back to Mr. Estes. There is a question from Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Representative Tom Phillips. I guess I'm still struggling with why we're not trying to capture new growth. I mean, here in Manhattan, we have we're still developing a lot of new residential areas, so that adds additional cost to our city. They have to provide police, fire, street maintenance, snow removal, and why we're not allowing that new tax base to be captured to spread that cost evenly across the new growth, as opposed to shifting all that right back onto the existing taxpayers. I'm really struggling why we're not trying to capture that and add it to the tax base. Is there a response to that?
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, there absolutely is a response. The example that I can give, a great example, say that you have a new building in Topeka, say a $3 million facility, and you had to put in some roads and some tax base, but you didn't need the full $3 million tax that was going to be coming into the city as a result of that increase. So what this would do for the first time in the state, you know, a lot of people may not, they hear that we want to expand the economy, they hear that we want to bring in new business, but they could actually see it as a result on their taxes, because the local officials, what they'll do then is, instead of just getting that blanket $3 million increase, they'll put out the notices, they'll explain what amount they need, and then the rest of it will go to lower the taxpayers that have been there for 20 and 40 years. It's, you know, the Senate debated this. We debated it for quite some time. And like I said, it was a bipartisan vote that super majority realized how important it was to have the transparency, the full transparency.
Senator, I don't disagree with transparency. It's, for me, it's an issue of fairness, that you're not requiring new buildings, and a $3 million building is not taxed at $3 million. I mean,
no, I'm saying that the tax on it would be $3 million. So make it a $50 million building. And yes, they do have taxes at that. I've got two. Pardon?
You just need to capture that new growth to help pay for the cost that is being incurred by the local governments to
right, and they do that with they do that with the letter and with the truth in taxation.
Not the way I understand it. We need, the mill is increased because that new valuation is not being added as new growth. So I have an issue there. And I guess, Mr. Chairman, if you allow me, one more thing. You know, the whole bill, I understand the importance of transparency, but I don't understand on the statements why we're not showing to the taxpayers the taxing burden imposed by the cities, the counties, the school districts, and the 20 mills for the state. It just seems that that's true transparency. That's truly showing the taxpayers where their taxpayers dollars are going. And I think that that's part of the needs to be in this bill, so that the taxpayer truly understands where their tax dollars are going, as opposed to just singling out one taxing entity.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. I think there's some confusions. There was a sample handed out with my testimony. Do you guys have that available with you? A sample letter, how all of the taxing authorities goes on the same letter. That was optional. One of the amendments that we will be making tomorrow in the Senate is to put them all on the same letter. So it won't be optional, it will be a requirement.
So, Mr. Chairman, so Senator, then all four of the major taxing entities would be shown on the statement. Is that correct?
No, any taxing authority that is requesting a truth in taxation hearing would be on the statement. So if they're not requesting an increase, they wouldn't show up on the statement. And then the schools, if the counties want to put the other ones on, it's absolutely optional. There's no restriction for them to leave that off.
Thank you for your questions. Do you have a further one, Representative Phillips?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
So thanks for the discussion on that. Mr. Estes, thanks for your patience. If you have a parting thought for us, I'd appreciate that. And you may still be on mute.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. No, I do have a couple comments, and I do appreciate the fact that people understand that what businesses are going through. But I even put on my letter, Wake Up Kansas. I'd like to the committee and some of the comments that were made from a lot of different taxpayers that I think you guys need to hear, and gals, because I just don't really think, I think people just think they're just complaining, they don't want to pay their tax. That isn't the case in this state anymore. Here's some examples. Our taxes raised 91% in a single year. Thought it got it lowered a little, still outrageous. I'm so ready to move out of the state, and I've lived here 58 years, my entire life, and I'm getting taxed out of it. Absolutely, the taxing more and more will cause older citizens to have to sell their homes. I got that from a county appraiser. County appraiser told me that elderly people were coming in having to leave Kansas and sell their homes because of taxes and utilities. It's embarrassing, guys and gals. And get to the point of this. When we retire, we have to sell our second generation home and move. Taxes on my 1,600 square foot house in Valley Center, Kansas are $2,300 a year. Perry, Oklahoma, the same amount is $1,223 a year.
And Mr. Estes, I do appreciate.
I mean, I can go on and on, but I want to make a point, though. I want to make a point about Senate bills, Chairman, if I could. And I appreciated Trey's comments, but my last parting comment is please consider what you're doing. We're at a critical stage. COVID is a big deal. Taxes are a big deal. A lot of people are wondering how they're going to pay their taxes. But the one thing you need to know that the conference committees, to resolve something that's so split, if it went 39-0 in the Senate and the House can't get it out of committee, we got a problem. The other thing is, if you kill the bill because you try to change it, I think a lot of things that Trey was asking for, and I believe that a lot of the locals did ask a lot of that in our meetings, and Karen can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of those dates and stuff could be done if you just pass Senate Bill 294 and get it out of House for a vote and it passes. Those corrections that Trey Hawking was talking about, the way I understand it, can be resolved in the next session. And if I stand corrected, I stand corrected. But thank you all for letting me present and to talk. I could go on for hours, and I know Chairman knows that.
and thank you for sharing and for everyone for being on the call. I do see Representative Croft's hand. We are going to move on for our next items. If you can ask your questions of the folks that need and make those comments known, we'll do our best to share them. And please remember them for our discussion on Thursday. I would like to have an overview of just some of the other topics that we would want to be ready for. I apologize to hold staff as well as members on longer, but there are a number of issues that are there. One bill that we had passed from the House was 2607, which related to payment plans. I felt it was just appropriate to mention that, as it was something that does deal with an issue that's at the front of a lot of people's minds. While the date of May 10th is passed, there may still be some issues there, and the ability to do plans both prospectively as well as retroactively are there. There was one item, I know Representative Kelly worked both on that bill and an amendment. Representative Kelly, in a moment, I'll have you just briefly go over that. I think that was sent out for us to review so we can see what that is. And then Senator Tyson, if you will stay with us to talk just briefly about a number of the Senate bills that are also awaiting consideration to lead us through that. So for the moment, Representative Kelly, if you'd take us through the 2607 and then on to Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee might remember that in February, we passed out a piece of legislation that modified a section that was already in place, talking about county treasurers could work out payment arrangements on delinquent accounts. And we added that they could, we basically just added, they could establish payment plans for delinquent or non-delinquent accounts. So one thing that had talked to the chairman about is that, you know, an easy way maybe to allow for the extension of the May 10th deadline and the waiving of if a county treasurer wanted to waive the interest and penalty was the addition of just a little bit to the end of that section. And in the what Adam prepared for me, handed out, this goes on right after at the end of line 13 that says, except for the second half payments due May 10th, 2020, the county treasurer of every county may waive interest and penalty or both if all taxes due for the 2019 tax year is paid within 90 days of the May 10th, 2020 due date. So it adds that on. Adam, I don't know whether you have any comments, but when that 90 days passes, that this piece that said would be moot, and it at least from what Adam told me, it'd probably be cleaned up the next time that work was done in that section. But it was a way to waive there's been a request on a number of the calls. Is there a way to waive the penalty and interest? Is there a way to extend the deadline? And this would be, I think, a simple way to move it out 3 months and have the option to waive the taxes and interest. And it is a county option, since the county's the one that collects the taxes.
So thank you for going over that, Representative. Committee, if you're looking for the wording, I believe you'll find it in an email from Ms. Gerard at 3:12 today, of all the emails, if you can sort through that came at that point in time. Does the revisor have anything to add at the direction of Representative Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam Siebers, Revisor's Office. No, he summarized it pretty succinctly. Like you said, that provision would only apply for that one tax year. Then after that, it would, you know, any further extensions would have to be done by subsequent legislation. And with that, I'll turn it back to you.
So thank you. And thank you, Representative Kelly. It at least gave a framework that we could work with, again, like the other bills that we've talked about. It's up to us where we want to go from here, if any here on it, but gives us a track to run on potentially with that issue that has been one that has had a lot of concern. So thank you, Representative Kelly. If you have questions for Representative Kelly, continue to think of those. And Senator Tyson, if you'd just help us a bit. In the House, we had a chance to have a hearing on 262 and 265, but there were a number, and it probably is helpful even to bring us back up to speed on those. If you just have a couple of words on some of the bills that we may have a chance to continue to consider going forward.
Yes, again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. 262 was fairly straightforward. It just is to help codify the times. You know, we have date certain that our taxes are due, and this just makes date certain of the timing of the request for an opinion from BOTA. The 264 was another bill. This passed the Senate 40-0. 264, again, 40-0. Removal of, if you have a rogue appraiser that was let go for a reason, just the opportunity to remove them from the eligible appraiser list. 265 was the option to receive notices by email. This is currently in statute. We've passed it already with in other areas, but this just puts it in so that it is obvious that if you want your services, if you request it via email or electronically, that BOTA has the opportunity. I think it would save them money and help make the process more efficient in itself. Again, it passed 40-0. Did you want me to talk about 272 also?
Certainly.
Okay, 272 was another property tax. This was an attempt. 294 was one of the products of the process this summer and fall, but these bills were also an attempt to make the process smoother. And 272 was prohibiting, it would stop, if you appeal your property taxes, then you wouldn't be in risk of the valuation increasing during the appeals process. Now, there's nothing to say that it wouldn't appeal, that it wouldn't go up the next year, but just because you appeal, you would not result in the valuation increase. And that, again, passed the Senate 40-0. 294, we talked about it, passed 39-0. And 295, I know you guys might have some concerns over that. It passed the Senate 38-1. What it did is just said, if your normal maintenance on your home, if you're fixing your roof, then you would not be in risk of your valuation going up. Your property tax could still go up, but your valuation wouldn't increase as a result of that normal maintenance. Now, if you put in new tile that's an upgrade, that's obviously going to increase the value and should or would increase your property taxes. 297 passed 40-0. It's just firming up that we would recognize USPAP compliance for our appraisal directives so that we make sure we're all using the same similar language. Did you, 309, are you interested in that, Mr. Chairman? Or?
Sure.
Okay, and 309, it was an interesting vote. It was 36-3, and it was, but what this does is when you start with an appraisal right now in statute at the county office, the burden of proof is on the county, and this just reaffirms it that when you go to a BOTA for burden of proof, it would be again on the county, starting with the county. One thing we did add to 309 on the Senate floor, and I was working with the governor's office and revenue in trying, and I had talked to the chairman in the House also, so I ran an amendment on the floor that would allow 120 days for a BOTA appointment instead of what's in current statute. It's currently 90 days. We were trying to give some flexibility so that we didn't risk BOTA shutting down. We're in a unique situation right now with only one member on that board right now.
So,
and that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the overview. Committee, are there any questions on some of those bills that you would like the senator to address for us? Are you just trying to help me make sure that I don't breach Commerce's timing record on the Zoom call? Seeing no hands at the moment, other than those that I think are on iPads in front of their screen. Unless, does Representative Gardner have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Quickly, my computer went down, so I had to switch to iPad. Sorry about that. And I just got into the tail end of Representative Kelly's bill on so his bill, that amendment's going to waive penalty and interest for property tax payments for how long?
Representative Kelly, would you like to speak to that amendment?
Yes, Representative Gardner, what's tacked on to what we did in February that passed committee but didn't get to the floor is that it would say that the county treasurer has the option to waive the May or to extend the May 10th payment for 90 days and the ability to waive penalty and interest for that 90-day period. So they would have into August to make this payment, and then in December they'd be coming up with another one. But this would extend it 90 days, and the interest and penalty could be waived at the county treasurer's option.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow up. So Representative Kelly, the most of the taxes were due yesterday, correct?
They were due yesterday, but figuring probably a lot of them may not have been paid because of the situation, and they would be able to go to the county treasurer and work out an arrangement with them to extend them for up to 90 days, their payment, and pay it off in that period of time, and there'd be no penalty or interest if the county chose that.
Mr. Chairman, do we have anyone on this conference call or a Zoom meeting from PVD that might be able to respond to how tax payments are coming into various counties?
We might, and that's one we would want to look at as we continue forward. And I would offer, in addition, whether it's a large number or a small number, if we're interested in the flexibility, we could do that either way, and would ask if that gave anybody from the Property Valuation Division a chance to look at any of that data or share it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing another light come on to help us. So.
And Mr. Chairman, I would say that I did work with Roger Ham at PVD to come up with an idea on what to do to extend the May payment and have it in legislation so it would be legal, since that's the way we've heard it needs to be done.
Thank you, Representative. And Representative Gardner, to your earlier comment, we may have both seen similar data that showed most of at least the larger counties were pretty normal in tax receipts, indicating that much of the May 10th payment is already in. I don't know, it's probably not all, but whether or not situations merit different treatment is one for us to consider.
Okay.
So, but thank you. The number was probably smaller than I had thought it might be from the preliminary data that I had seen. But Representative Croft, I believe, has a question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Representative Croft. Just to follow up with that, in Johnson County, this is a big issue. There's been a lot of discussion about this waiving of this penalty and fees. So there's a lot of support up here for that.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Senator Tyson, I know that you can't raise your hand. I do now see Representative Epley. So Representative Epley and then Senator Tyson, if you have further comments.
Just to pile on what Representative Croft said, I've had at least
maybe 8 constituents reach out to me that want an extension. I mean, it's like Jim Kelly looked into a crystal ball and could see this coming for property taxes. And I think this is really very much needed right now at this time in light of the COVID crisis. So kudos to Representative Kelly. And again, I totally agree with what Representative Croft said. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I know this is a unique situation, and I appreciate it, Representative Kelly, and you bringing this to our attention. We'll be discussing it tomorrow in the Senate committee meeting. I did have a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
I'm curious as to the 90 days versus 12 weeks, and if you are considering delaying the notices in the newspaper at all.
Well, the reason that I did 90 days, we talked about 12 weeks at one time, that it was 6 days longer than 12 weeks. And it seemed easier to calculate when you put some days to it rather than weeks. So I chose my simple method of 90 days, so you knew exactly how long that was without having to go to the difficult multiplication of 12 times 7.
And are you planning on delaying the notifications in the newspaper?
The
delinquent payment
of delinquent taxes?
Yes, because those start in August. If 60 days, it wouldn't interfere with that, but with 90, there is some interference. So I was wondering if you guys were looking at a delay on that.
That's one I hadn't thought about, so.
But thank you both, Representative and Senator. And Senator, I would agree, we need to look at those publishing of names that are delinquent, as well as maybe another item or two if the revisers can help us think of other things that are inconsistent, as we might have those delays be legal and have another statute that says we're going to print your name if you're delayed by this. So I believe you're on the right track in thinking of making sure that and perhaps another couple of things need to be synced up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you, the Vice Chairman, the ranking, and all the members for your consideration. I know these are really tough times, and we see a very, very small window here of possibly getting some legislation. Understandably, I don't know that anybody has ever thought any piece of legislation is perfect, but I do appreciate you guys, and thank you very much.
Thank you for joining our call. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Representative Stogsdill.
Yes, I was just wondering, Representative Stogsdill, just wondered if Representative Kelly's suggestion on the 90 days, I certainly support that. Since we won't be in session anymore really till for the rest of the year, and I'm certainly hoping this COVID thing gets to a point where we've got business back online, we've got people making money where they're able to pay their property taxes on time and so on. But I'm wondering if we ought to give the counties the authorization not only for this tax period, but maybe for the one in December.
The one thing, if this went through as it is, they would actually have the authorization if a taxpayer came to them before the December deadline and worked out a payment arrangement with them. I mean, because they can work out a payment arrangement for delinquent and non-delinquent taxes. At least that was the way that I was looking at it. That option would be there for this one. The option to do the May 10th, what we have doesn't give the option to waive the penalty and interest, and that was putting this in for May 10th to waive it. But they could work out a payment arrangement if this went through as it was originally written. At least that was my thought, and the reviser, Adam, you may have a comment on that.
Yeah, Adam Seaberg, Supervisor's Office. I just concur that the waiver would only apply for the May 10th payments that be due, and as Representative Kelly said, then after that, the payment plans could be instituted, assuming the whole bill went past. However, with the understanding that as part of the payment plans, those would include any interest or penalties for the non-payment of taxes by that due date.
Representative Stogsdill, is that enough clarification at this point?
So essentially, the people looking to pay their taxes in December would still have that same availability that they do have for this May time period? But they have the same advantages in December that they do for the May period.
The one advantage they would not have, and Adam can correct me, is they would not have the advantage of a waived penalty and interest if they, because there's not a 90-day waiver. They could actually spread the tax out over a longer period of time, but it doesn't have that same waiver into it. It doesn't take away any of the other, it doesn't take away anything else that says any of the consequences of untimely payments. So the way that's written.
Okay, just to be clear, it does, they would still have to pay the penalties and so on in the tax period starting in December?
It would be worked into the way I understand it, it'd be worked into the payment plan.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because as I say, I hope this is rectified by December, but if it's not, I think that obviously we want those same benefits available in December that we do in May.
So, or potentially, if I hear you, Representative Stogsdill, saying that as the way it is currently written, and again, there are a variety of options and directions we could go, it provides the counties the option of having a waiver of penalties and fees for 90 days currently, and then that option ceases to exist under this one. You're suggesting perhaps we would also allow the option of the county at their discretion waive that in December.
Absolutely.
So that's one route, and another one is to say that it is waived and be more directed. So there are a variety of directions that we could go, but thank you for raising that point, as there are a lot of options. And thanks again to Representative Kelly for giving us one track to start tossing around. Other further questions or comments? Representative Heineman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, you know, the concept behind the interest and penalty is to encourage payment. And certainly for this May 10th payment, it makes sense, and I don't believe it will be that big a deal. I think most folks have paid or not paid, which is their normal habit. But if we look ahead to December and grant a waiver of interest and penalty, I think that creates an opportunity for many taxpayers to try to take advantage of that 90-day float and delay payment of their taxes. I would have a very large concern about what that would do to local units of government, that 90 days delay in payment to them. So for May, I think it's a good idea. As a matter of routine, I think it's fraught with difficulty. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thanks for everyone's 2 cents. Do we have any cent remaining? If we are out of cents at the moment, we will be ready to move on. So, committee, first, thank you for your patience. And I can't tell you how we are going to do things to Representative Helgerson's question at the outset, which is an important question. But our focus in the short term will continue to be what we want to do. So if you'll continue to think about these topics and what we would recommend to be there for wording to be considered, and we continue to work with our Senate partners and our limited options as we go forward, how we best try and make any of these things become enacted. It'll be a short period of time. Raise your concerns early and often so that we can make sure that all of the good things that are on the shelf, we can figure out how to get them through in the limited window that we have. So appreciate your engagement on that. And again, think of wording, think of amendments. I know Adam doesn't want to be lonely over the next couple of days as we work on different options for wording, and appreciate that. I will look forward to seeing you on Thursday. One other thing I want to make sure we do before we leave, as challenging as this is for all of us, I want to say a huge thanks to staff for scrambling, for figuring out how to get this together, for making it happen. So if you want to go to your screen and hit reactions down at the bottom, you can give a little clap right there for our staff. If you just want to do it with your hands in the window, please join me in a huge thank you to staff for sharing with us and keeping us going. And we look forward to your work on Thursday. With no other comments at the moment, we're adjourned, but please continue to communicate your thoughts and questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Have a great couple days and stay safe.
Thank you.